Claire Lee Chennault, An Aviator Beyond Explanation by Caleb Skinner. Claire Lee Chennault was a fantastic American airman who arrived in a devastated China during the Sino-Japanese War and stayed there during World War II. Chennault isn't the most well-known pilot, but he invented many extremely helpful aerobatic tactics. I hope to show you that he was very significant to the stability of China and several other countries. Claire Lee Chennault was a brilliant aviator, commander of the Flying Tigers, and made a tremendous impact on the United States Air Force. I'm going to show you an interview I had with Major General Chennault's granddaughter, Miss Nell Calloway, who runs the Chennault Aviation and Military Museum in Monroe, Louisiana. I first asked her why he became a soldier and how. I'm going to show you clips from that interview and some photos of Chennault and the Flying Tigers. This first clip tells about how he wanted to fly airplanes.
He saw his very first airplane in 1910. That was 1910. If you remember, the Wright brothers flew for the very first time in 1903. So it was only 7 years after the first plane had taken any flight. And he was at a state fair in Shreveport, Louisiana, and he saw an airplane fly and he thought, boy, that looks like something I would like to do one day.
This second clip tells about how he became an airman.
In 1917, when the United States entered World War I, you're recording it so you don't have to remember all these dates. But in 1917, when the United States entered World War I, he signed up and joined the military, and he signed up to fly airplanes. But this is an important lesson, I think, it's good for all, especially young people your age, to realize that they told him, you don't have any qualities. You don't, basically it said you don't have any qualifications to be an airman. So they turned him down and they put him on a horse, and he was in the cavalry during World War I. And he applied the second time. And again, they said, you do not possess the necessary qualifications. And they turned him down the second time, but he never, ever gave up when he wanted to do something. And then he applied the third time, but guess what? It didn't work either. They turned him down for the third time, but he wasn't going to give up. And it was on his fourth application that finally they told him, okay, you can come and get your wings to fly. Well, he loved it, and he loved flying. But also he had been studying very hard about the way airplanes had done combat in World War I.
The World War I air tactics just were not good. Chennault had new ideas about this. He practiced his ideas as an airman on the Army's precision flying team. He invented the wingman flying formation and wrote a book about it. My pictures show World War I dogfights and the flying formations used in World War I and World War II thanks to Chennault's tactics. Here's Miss Calloway with more on this and how he got to China.
The planes had two wings. They didn't have just a single wing. They had two wings. They had open cockpits a lot of times, so the pilots would wear these goggles on their eyes. But he had three men. He had himself in the middle and what they call wingmen. He had an airplane on each side, and it was called 3 Men on the Flying Trapeze. Well, he used this, and they used to go do air shows all over the United States for the Army Air Corps. It wasn't the Air Force then. But he was studying how airplanes could fly together in formation, how they could do loops and rolls and come back and maybe shoot again at their opponent. And so he developed a book and even wrote a book called
Chennault had these great ideas, but the Army wasn't a fan.
They said, we don't really need fighter airplanes anymore. But my grandfather, General Chennault, really believed that they were going to need fighter airplanes. So he ended up, the Chinese, way before we got into the war, the Chinese heard about the book that he wrote on how to do fighter tactics with fighter airplanes. And so they invited him to come to China. And he got to China.
The Chinese were in the Sino-Japanese War and were short of planes to fight off the Japanese. Chennault saw the Chinese people suffering and wanted to help. Here's Miss Connolly with more about this.
So he worked for China from 1937 for 4 years and tried to help them overcome the Japanese, but they had a hard time because they didn't have enough pilots and airplanes. So he came home and he convinced our president, President Roosevelt, to let China buy some more airplanes from the United States. And he also convinced President Roosevelt to let some of our pilots that were in the Army, Navy, and Marine Corps to go to fight for China and to help the Chinese. And they ended up getting in China in 1941, and you probably haven't studied it yet, but on December 7th, 1941, the Japanese attacked the United States at Pearl Harbor. Have you studied that? And we went to war with the Japanese, and we ended up going to war also with the Germans and their allies.
The Flying Tigers, which Chennault commanded while in China, were made up of 99 volunteers from the U.S. and flew P-40s, also known as Warhawks.
The American Volunteer Group, they actually, for the very first time, saw combat right after the United States went to war. And on December 20th, they shot down 9 of 10 Japanese airplanes. They were the very first Americans to have a victory in World War II. And in the 7 months' time that they flew together with less than 100 pilots, they actually, and only about 50 or 60 airplanes operational, they shot down 299 Japanese airplanes confirmed, about that many unconfirmed, and they only lost 12 airplanes in combat using the tactics that General Chennault had created in his aerobatic acts.
Wow.
Yeah. And so he is now known. They give a trophy every year in our Air Force that's the General Claire Chennault Trophy to the pilot that excels, that does the best in fighter tactics.
299 planes confirmed and 299 planes unconfirmed. That's 598 planes down. Next time you see a plane in the sky, think of Claire Lee Chennault, a brilliant American aviator who overcame many challenges. Thanks for watching.